let's go from the contender to the championship favorite. I don't know if you heard, but the Warriors will win the championship. What do you like? Okay, obviously that's when Draymond said that and doubled down on it, and it was in front of a San Francisco crowd, and
he also thinks that the league teams only shoot threes or some shit.
Right.
And so I'm questioning Draymond's IQ
Come
all
on,
over
man.
again.
Like, the reputation is one of the smartest players ever. Anyway, so before we get into the merits of it, I would just point out that in the recent past, the war, like Kerr and even Steph and a lot of people associated with the team have said, like, I'm paraphrasing, but have essentially like admitted when they don't have it. Like, what they kind of have been pretty forthright when they've had teams that are just like, we're not at the level that we used to be, or we're not in that top level. I think they have admitted that fairly readily in the past, over the past few seasons. So like, I do think, despite it being objectively wild that Draymond said that, it to me indicates like they actually might like collectively think something close to that as a team with Jimmy Butler on board. We don't need to get into like how valid that is, because I just think even you can't say that 3 games into the guy's time with the team, and one player just can't be that impactful with all the problems the Warriors have. But I think we do need to, like, using the small sample we've had so far, there'll be another game played by the time you hear this. From what you've seen, would you agree that Jimmy Butler, whatever he does to lift the overall ceiling, like really, really clearly addresses like a couple of the biggest problems that this team has in a way that like does in fact like kind of change things from a like, this team is a 500 team to, okay, they could win around and like get interesting beyond that potentially. Is that overblowing it?
No, because you're talking to first of all, you're talking to the wrong person about this. I just wrote about how I think the Warriors are going to finish in the top 6 for the regular season. And I think I would have to double check, but like the odds of that are just not in their favor, because they have, as we're recording this, 4 losses to make up, and like inside of 30 games to go. That's really hard to do. But what you just said, I think what the Jimmy Butler trade, if we had to kind of boil it down to a simplified take, did more than anything, it gave the Warriors actual lightning in a bottle potential now, because of the things that he can potentially address, which is another from scratch sort of creator. They have never, well, I'll say during this Steph era, they have never had a perimeter player that can put pressure on the rim and generate free throws like he can. You've already mentioned the sample size is very small. The offense has been really good when he plays without Steph, Grant, so far. That's a big fucking deal. And so if you put the Warriors, let's say they get out of the play, if you put the Warriors in a playoff series, these are the teams I'm prepared to guarantee that they will not beat. The Thunder, and that's it.
Yeah.
And like, I would still have the Nuggets ahead of them. I want to make that clear. But if you're getting into like in a playoff series, I'm going to need to see a hell of a lot more from a Houston, from a Memphis, from the Lakers to say like, no, like they're definitely better equipped to beat the Thunder or the Nuggets than the Warriors might be in a vacuum. So I don't think I would argue that you're not Warriors pilled enough.
Oh boy, is that what we're doing? Well, so yeah, I do think the one of the most interesting aspects of the storyline I'm watching here, which I should have been more explicit about, is like, how good is this Warriors team down the stretch, like post addition? Like, I think the Butler, it was almost a rhetorical ask of you. Like, yeah, Butler getting to the line and actually also like curbing turnovers, just because like when he has the ball, things get simplified. It's like he's going to make the right pass. He doesn't swing for home runs very much, which everybody else that's on the ball for the Warriors tends to do. So you cut the turnovers, you slow the game down, you make the rest for Steph actually extend, because you're shooting free throws all the time if Butler's on the floor and Steph is not. So like it counts double. Like there are real like knock-on effects of like the couple things that he does very, very well. In addition to the whole like, oh shit, he might just be the best player in a playoff series, regardless of who's on the other side. Like that's actually still possible. What I'm actually most interested in now is like, so what is the best lineup for this team against the best opponents? like it's just not going to include spacing. And how big of a deal is that? Because you're going to reintroduce Jonathan Kuminga pretty soon. And you would assume whether he starts or not, if he's not in a closing lineup, everybody's upset, include him, ownership. Like everybody's pissed off if Kuminga is not right back out there late in
Can
game.
I interject for a second? Just given the trajectory of how things have gone with Kuminga and Golden State, isn't that almost what you expect to have? Like, there's always another shoe that's dropping, or like there's highs and lows, and there's never like an in between.
Yeah, it's insane. It's the biggest yo-yo effect ever. I just like my opinion. I think you have to at least give it a real extended look over these last 30 or so games with Steph, Butler, Kuminga, Draymond, I guess Pajemski or Moody. I don't know who you're like. I think Buddy Hield has kind of played himself out, even though like, God, they need a gravity kind of type of shooter. And he just hasn't been it. I think you have to really give that a long look and see how viable the offense is. Cause you want to be switchable and athletic and have more rim pressure, which Kuminga provides in addition to Butler and Draymond. Like those three guys can really kind of give you some real variety on both ends. I think you're obligated to give that as long of a look as you possibly can. Whether they'll do that or not, hard to say. Cause like you pointed out, like sometimes they just don't do it. I really think that Kuminga can be an additive player, but man, we've seen him just go into the tank when he isn't, getting big time on ball reps in a major role. And with Butler there, it's way harder for him to be in that position. And like, that's a knock that matters to him and that affects how he plays, but it is just reality. So I'll be watching like, well, what version of Kuminga from a motivational, like an aggressiveness and confidence standpoint is going to show up. And then how healthy is he? This is a really long layoff for an ankle injury. And then how much rope do the Warriors give this, what should I think be their most dangerous lineup?
I'm so curious to see what the integration of Kuminga, like what is the offense? I know, so we know what their top 4 players in theory should be. So who would your preferred? You already mentioned Buddy Hield, but like, who would your preferred default 5th guy be? Or like, how do you play Draymond, Jimmy Butler, and Kuminga together schematically? It's just like, is it like Kuminga has to be a spacer around Draymond and Jimmy with Steph actions right a lot of the time, or no? Like, what is?
Yeah, he does. And he shot 40% from 3 in like the 15 or 20 games prior to injury. Like he was making threes. We always talk about though, like every defense is going to be like, thank you for shooting that still. Like he's not the guy that you're freaking out about, being
turn back the clock to preseason shooting. That was something else.
So yeah, I don't know what that's going to look like. He will have to space and be opportunistic in attacking closeouts. And honestly, like you're not putting your best, most athletic defender on him. So that's a plus because that guy's going to have to guard Butler now. And your quickest, sharpest wing is going to be on Steph. Like, so there will be opportunities. I think the 5th guy right now, I think Pajemski's playing the best. I think Moody's pretty close. But if Pajemski can make threes, then he gives you another guy that'll make plays too, which still matters. So it'll be fluid. Unfortunately, it would be nice if Pajemski just had like a stranglehold on it, but he just doesn't. And I think Moody can be the better guy on some nights, but I don't know, unless I'm just grossly overlooking somebody, I'm not really thinking that hard about anybody else for that last spot. Unless Hield gets like, first 15 games hot, which feels like the exception to the rule now.
Well, also is sort of what you've laid out. So it's not going to be like their default is Draymond at the 5.
I'm just thinking like you're trying to win the last 5 minutes. That's who's got to be out there.
Yeah.
It does seem like Quentin Post, I think, is going to get the, like, you're going to get up 3 threes in your first stint. And if you make 1 or 2 of them, you might see some second half action. And if you don't, it's going to be Looney. And then that exacerbates the spacing crunch. I mean, even more. But I think TJD is out of the rotation just because he just isn't doing enough to justify playing over Looney or Post. But yeah, I kind of feel like it's going to be a lot of Looney, and you're going to look at lineups that sometimes have Steph's the only guy you care about as a spacer, and like what happens then,